Penelope Ford stepped hesitantly through the gleaming glass doors of lessons, her worn thrifted dress brushing softly against her calves. The interior dazzled her. Crystal chandeliers scattered glittering light across polished mahogany tables, delicate floral arrangements perfumed the air with subtle jasmine, and the soft murmur of refined conversation floated in the background. It was a world apart from her quiet neighborhood, a realm of luxury she had never dared to enter before. She clutched her modest handbag a little tighter, a simple canvas tote that bore the faint stains of everyday use, and took a slow breath, trying to steady the nervous flutter in her chest. Her plain brown shoes, scuffed at the tips, made no sound against the marble floor, but she felt every pair of eyes shift towards her. Moments after her arrival, she noticed subtle movements, a glance here, a whispered exchange there, that betrayed the judgment of the restaurant's elite patrons. At a corner table, a group of impeccably dressed women paused mid-conversation, their eyes flicking toward her with thinly veiled disdain. One of them leaned toward another and, loud enough for nearby diners to catch, said, "Looks like someone sent the delivery girl the wrong way." Laughter rippled, soft but unmistakable. Another guest, a sharply dressed gentleman with a sly grin, nodded in agreement, muttering something about misplaced couriers. Standing near the entrance, the maitre d' watched Penelope with an unfriendly scrutiny. His dark eyes swept over her plain shoes, the frayed edges of her tote, and the slight stoop in her posture. His lips curled just enough to reveal the silent judgment: she did not belong here. The air thickened with expectations she could not meet, but Penelope remained rooted, her resolve soft but visible beneath the sleek veneer of exclusion. The maitre d' approached Penelope with the fluid grace of someone used to commanding a room. His dark eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he folded his hands neatly in front of him. "Good evening, ma'am. May I help you?" His tone was polished but carried the unmistakable edge of suspicion. Penelope swallowed the nervous lump that had settled in her throat, her voice small but steady. "I have a reservation. Penelope Ford." The maitre d' raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "May I have the reservation name again?" "Penelope Ford," she repeated, steadying herself. "I booked earlier this week." He reached for a sleek tablet on the podium, thumbs swiping with practiced efficiency. His eyes scanned the list, then flicked back to her with a faint smirk. "I'm sorry, Miss Ford, but I don't see any reservation under that name for this evening." Across the room, murmurs stirred among the diners. Some of the tables were beginning to turn their gaze toward the unfolding scene. Penelope cleared her throat, willing her voice to sound casual. "There must be a mistake. I even received a confirmation email." The maitre d' allowed a brief, cold laugh to escape. Perhaps the email was from a third-party site. "You see, we only accept reservations through our own system." "Are you certain?" "Please," Penelope interrupted gently, "I'm here to dine. I've come all this way." The maitre d' raised a hand, cutting her off with a patronizing smile. "I'm afraid, ma'am, without a confirmed booking, you cannot be seated as a guest." A ripple of stifled chuckles swept through the room. Someone openly pulled out a phone, waving it as if to record what they dubbed the delivery mix-up. From a nearby table, a stylish woman with sharply coiffed hair leaned in dramatically, voice loud enough for others to hear. "She must have taken a wrong turn. Maybe she's here to pick up an order." Laughter blossomed among her companions. Penelope's face flushed crimson, her hands trembled ever so slightly, fingers tightening around her bag. She forced her shoulders to straighten, trying to reclaim the dignity slipping through her fingers. "I'm not delivery staff," Penelope said quietly, yet with enough volume to challenge the murmurs. "I'm a guest. Please." The maitre d' gestured vaguely toward the back of the restaurant with a thin smile. "If you insist on waiting, ma'am, you can do so near the kitchen area." We'll let you know if a cancellation frees a table. The words landed like a blow, the polite veneer dripping with condescension. Penelope felt all eyes on her again, not as a guest, but as an unwelcome intruder in a world she wasn't meant to inhabit. Exchanging nervous glances, some patrons resumed quiet conversations. Others whispered about the spectacle, their voices laced with amusement or pity. Penelope took a hesitant step toward the restricted side of the restaurant, her heart pounding in sync with silent prayers for composure. A waiter passed by but averted his gaze as if she were invisible. Near the kitchen doors, the clatter of plates and murmur of hurried staff contrasted sharply against the polished elegance of the dining room. Penelope stood still, the unwanted spotlight bearing down on her as the maitre d' returned to his post, arms folded, eyes scanning. She glanced at the onlookers again. No smiles met her expression, only averted eyes or thinly disguised scorn. A man at a nearby table nudged his companion and mouthed, "Who does she think she is?" A teenager from a corner booth whispered loudly, "Looks like a courier who wandered in looking for the loading dock." Suddenly, a sharp pang of loneliness squeezed her chest. She tried to steady her breathing, willing herself not to cry, not to crumble. But the humiliation was undeniable. She felt her identity melting away behind the walls of wealth and privilege that surrounded her. Minutes stretched to an unbearable eternity. Penelope glanced toward the entrance, longing either for someone to step forward in her defense or for courage to sweep away the shame. But the room remained indifferent, the cold current of exclusion running unchecked. A child seated nearby toyed with a napkin, glancing at her with innocent curiosity, but even that fleeting spark felt like a fragile exception in a sea of silent judgment. Then, footsteps approached fast, breaking the suspended moment. An assistant, impeccably dressed, appeared beside Penelope, voice polite but urgent. "Miss Ford? The chef requests your presence." The maitre d' turned sharply, brows knitting in surprise as heads began to shift. Whispers spread quickly, a sudden rush of intrigue replacing the earlier contempt. Penelope's vision cleared slightly as the assistant offered a reassuring smile, extending a hand. She glanced once more at the indifferent crowd, then stepped forward, the weight of their glances trailing behind her like a shadow, but now mingled with a spark of unexpected possibility. In the quiet shadow of the kitchen corridors, Penelope paused, the polished tiles cool beneath her feet. The clamor of the restaurant felt distant, like an echo from another world. Her heart was a storm of emotions. Embarrassment still knotted tightly alongside a fragile hope sparked by the assistant summons. The encounter with the maitre d' had left a sting too sharp to dismiss, a public dismissal burning more fiercely than mere words should allow. Meanwhile, in the sleek and glass-encased office overlooking the dining room, Richard Calloway, the maitre d', leaned back in his leather chair, a self-satisfied smirk curling his lips. He rubbed his chin, eyes narrowing as he replayed the interaction in his mind. To him, the defense of the restaurant's prestigious image was a duty that demanded vigilance, and often, firm boundaries. In his view, Penelope had tried to cross into a realm where she did not belong, risking the sanctity of what he considered a carefully curated elite. His actions, while harsh, were justified by a strict code of exclusivity he took as gospel. "Imposters like her dilute everything that we've built," he muttered to himself, fingers tapping the dark wood desk. "She's clearly not one of us. If we allow this to slide, it sets a dangerous precedent." To Richard, Penelope's simple dress, modest manner, and uncertain posture confirmed his suspicion. She was an outsider, a misstep in the flawless rhythm of L'Essence cultivated elegance. Back in the dining room, life continued as usual. Forks clinked on fine china, low laughter rippled through gathered tables, and servers moved with practiced precision. The guests had largely reverted to their endless banter and discreet phone checks, the scandal of Penelope's arrival already fading into the backdrop, just another note in the evening symphony of privilege. Yet beneath the surface calm, the air shifted, Penelope remained pressed against the marble column near the staff entrance, fingers twisting the strap of her tote as she fought to steady the shaky calm within her. The faint flush on her cheeks hadn't vanished, but a spark of resilience glimmered in her eyes. Her mouth was tightly closed, lips set firm to stem the tide of vulnerability. Suddenly, the assistant from before returned swiftly, a serene yet determined figure in the swirling storm of glances. "Miss Ford, if you'll come this way," she said softly, gesturing toward a narrow staircase ascending to the restaurant's private salon. The murmurs among patrons around her began anew, curious and confused whispers, eyes soon unlocking from their dismissive gazes. Some shifted in their seats, leaning in to observe the strange turn of events. The conspicuous attention was undeniable, and the murmurs buzzed louder. Upstairs, the private salon overflowed with soft light and delicate floral arrangements. It was an intimate setting reserved for special occasions and guests of honor. The celebrated chef, Marco Bellini, stood there waiting, a tall man with tousled dark hair, sharp eyes that had both warmth and a commanding presence. He smiled broadly the moment Penelope entered, stepping forward with a respectful bow. "Miss Ford," Marco greeted, his voice rich and inviting, "I'm grateful you accepted our invitation." Penelope blinked, startled. "Invitation? I don't understand." Marco gestured gracefully to a discreet table adorned with a bouquet of wildflowers and a small card bearing her name. "We've been expecting you," he said simply. "Your support has changed this place in ways the public doesn't always see." Confusion mingled with burgeoning pride flushed across Penelope's face. I didn't realize people knew me here." Marco's gaze was steady and sincere. "Your discreet generosity has been the bedrock of our recent expansion and philanthropy efforts. Without your investment, the Chef's Foundation and our community outreach programs would not exist." Back downstairs, a ripple of change swept through the restaurant. The maitre d', sensing a disturbance, glanced anxiously toward the private salon's windows, his brows furrowed as whispers and excited looks rippled from those in the main dining room. The atmosphere no longer felt settled, a shudder of surprise and whispered speculation moved like wildfire. Upstairs, Marco extended his hand, inviting Penelope to stand beside him. With a courteous nod from the assistant who followed close behind, he addressed the small gathering of event staff, select patrons, and VIP guests invited to the salon. "It is my honor to formally introduce Penelope Ford, a remarkable woman whose vision and kindness have quietly guided much of what we achieve here. Her commitment to using this platform for greater good is an inspiration." He bowed his head in reverence and then, before the eyes of everyone present, bent down, lifting Penelope's hand gently and pressing a kiss upon it. There was a collective intake of breath, the moment hanging like a delicate glass sculpture, glinting in the warm light. Penelope's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of rose, but she met Marco's eyes, calm and poised, without a trace of triumph. She straightened, the simplicity of her design-forward dress, a muted cream fabric with clean lines, speaking volumes. She explained briefly, "I prefer to live minimally. It helps me stay connected to what really matters, far beyond appearances or possessions. I just returned from one of our projects in the field, tending to farmers and communities," her voice soft but heartfelt. A journalist near the window scribbled notes eagerly, while several guests whispered about how their perceptions had been shattered in a single moment. Downstairs, the maitre d' felt the ground shift beneath him. He caught a glimpse of a server whispering urgently. His jaw clenched as realization dawned: the woman he had dismissed, humiliated, and cast aside was not only a guest but a key benefactor of the entire establishment. A tremor of disbelief clawed through him, threading with a bitter taste of regret. He straightened his jacket, fighting a sudden urge to disappear into the shadows. Meanwhile, Penelope sat quietly, absorbing the scene and the weight of what had just unfolded. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, the earlier vulnerability replaced by quiet strength. Around her, opulent surroundings, so far removed from her humble life, now seemed to echo with the promise of changed perspectives and tempered hearts. The chef's praise and the room's respectful silence formed an unexpected bridge between two worlds. A stark contrast to the earlier callousness, this moment was one of grace, proving that humility and power could coexist without contradiction. Penelope's gentle dignity, unadorned by the trappings others so prized, lingered in the air, a quiet rebuke to the shallow standards that had so quickly judged her. It was a reminder that true worth could never be measured by fabric or fortune, but by the courage to remain authentic in the face of exclusion. The gathering in the private salon was crisp and intimate, yet the ripple it sent throughout the restaurant's main dining room was anything but small. The murmurs that had started upstairs now swelled into a wave of astonishment that seeped below the ornate railings and into the chandelier's sparkle. Penelope stepped forward beside Chef Marco Bellini, a calm figure against the soft cream of her modest dress. Despite her simple attire, a contrast to the gleaming silks and bespoke suits around her, there was an undeniable presence about her, a quiet confidence born from years of steadfast dedication that no flashy gown could imitate. Marco's voice echoed clearly as he addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to present the woman whose generosity and vision underpin much of our success here at Lessons. Miss Penelope Ford is not only a silent partner but a force for positive change in countless communities, supporting the sustainable sourcing and outreach programs that keep our kitchen, and indeed, our kitchen table, thriving." The dining room fell into a stunned hush. Crystal flutes paused midair. Conversations tapered off and gazes turned upward, eyes widened and mouths parted in shock. The guests who had only moments ago exchanged whispers of scorn and derision now found their judgments turned on their heads. The maitre d', Richard Calloway, whose sharp gaze had once dismissed Penelope as an ill-fitting courier, stood motionless, a statue carved from disbelief. His thoughts spun in reluctant circles, struggling to reconcile the elegant woman before him with the simple figure who had so recently been shunned. Phones dropped from tables in surprise, some guests too shocked to react in time, others hurriedly tapping out messages, their words a blend of contrition and disbelief. Whispers ran rampant now, threads of conversation swirling with phrases like, "I can't believe it," "How did I miss that," and "We treated her terribly." The sharp-edged socialite who had loudly mocked Penelope just moments before now shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes flicked covertly towards the woman commanding the room, but she busied herself with an overly dramatic swipe of her napkin, the veneer of confidence cracking. A younger man at the next table awkwardly cleared his throat, casting her a pointed glance. Amid the sudden shift in mood, a few once harsh critics sought to mitigate their earlier behavior. A prominent guest approached Penelope with quick, rehearsed words, "I'm so sorry for my earlier remarks. It was utterly uncalled for." Penelope's smile was warm but measured, a courteous grace, not the triumphant glee some might have expected. "I appreciate your kindness," Penelope replied simply, her voice steady. "We all have moments of misunderstanding." The gesture of forgiveness rippled through the room like a quiet breeze, far more powerful than any spectacle of wrath or vindication. Then Marco lowered himself to one knee in a theatrical yet sincere gesture, taking Penelope's hand gently into his own. Before the entire crowd, he bowed his head and pressed a delicate kiss to the back of her hand. A collective hush enveloped the room, followed by appreciative applause that felt heartfelt, not performative. Flashbulbs popped and cameras clicked, capturing this unexpected, elegant moment, the humble philanthropist, the celebrated chef, and a shared philosophy that transcended societal division. Penelope's thoughts briefly flicked inward. She explained the choice of her simple attire, not as a statement of poverty, but of principle. "I prefer to live minimally," she confided, her eyes reflecting a gentle flame. "It keeps me connected to the essentials: people, purpose, community." I had just returned from one of our recent projects abroad, where the impact of our work is most evident. Her words resonated deeply with many in the room, their previous preoccupations with glittering surfaces suddenly seeming trivial. Applause rose again, more heartfelt this time, as though the conversation had evolved beyond fashion or status to something deeply human. Back in the main dining room, the maitre d's face betrayed his turmoil. His lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw clenched as he watched the elegant scene through the glass. The stark reality of his misjudgment prodded relentlessly at his pride. He shifted uncomfortably, a man forced to confront his own failure to see past appearances. Guests began to withdraw their disdain, but some glances still bristled with the memory of the earlier humiliation. A few stiff conversations bloomed at neighboring tables, the air electric with the social reckoning underway. A young server, who had witnessed the entire scene with wide eyes, quietly mused, "It's a lesson in humility, isn't it? Sometimes the most remarkable people are the ones who don't try to impress." Penelope remained composed, even as the moment hung heavy with complexity. She neither gloatingly reveled in her vindication nor feigned victimhood. Instead, she stood as a testament to quiet strength, the kind born of perseverance, empathy, and genuine purpose. As the evening wore on, the buzz of excitement stirred a transformation in the room, lines once drawn by fashion and fortune blurred beneath the influence of someone who embodied values beyond the surface. Lessons, a temple of luxury and exclusivity, now bore the mark of a woman whose presence demanded a broader understanding of grace and dignity. The final exchanges of the night left an indelible imprint on the guests, many of whom retold the story with newfound respect. Penelope Ford had entered their world as a figure of humble elegance and left as an emblem of quiet power. The maitre d's silence lingered, a subtle acknowledgement that the standards he had zealously guarded would require reconsideration, perhaps even change, whether he welcomed it or not. The mood in lessons had shifted palpably since Penelope's revelation. Guests lingered over their meals with a mix of awe and introspection, whispers replaying the chef's introduction and the maitre d's stunned silence. What had begun as a night of exclusive indulgence was now marked by an unexpected lesson in humility and grace. Backstage, Chef Marco Bellini's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. He moved confidently through the kitchen, rallying the staff with renewed energy. Yet his sharp gaze occasionally flicked toward Richard Calloway, the maitre d'. The man looked increasingly out of place, shoulders hunched beneath his immaculate jacket as if shrinking under the weight of his recent blunder. Later that evening, Marco stepped out onto the restaurant floor, commanding attention with a voice firm and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must address a matter of some urgency. It has come to my attention that earlier this evening, a valued guest was treated with disrespect and disregard due to assumptions that have no place within these walls." The crowd hushed completely, the sequence of events still fresh in their minds. Many eyes fixed on the maitre d', who stood stiffly beside the bar, muscles taut and expression guarded. "For that," Marco continued, "I take full responsibility. Effective immediately, Richard will be relieved of his duties here at Lessons. His actions do not reflect the values we uphold. We must foster a culture of respect for all who cross this threshold." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some surprised, others nodding solemnly. The news of Richard's removal spread swiftly. Within minutes, the staff began visibly sidestepping him, their usual respect replaced by cautious distance. In the days that followed, Richard Calloway found himself isolated, fielding uncomfortable calls from former colleagues, and grappling with an unexpected professional crisis. The restaurant's social media channels buzzed with discussions of the incident, hashtags critiqued his judgment, while others praised the swift actions taken. Forced to undergo sensitivity and customer service training as part of his rehabilitation, Richard's internal defenses gradually softened. The man who once viewed exclusivity as armor began to confront the cost of his rigidity, both professionally and personally. One afternoon, as Penelope attended a cultural gala downtown, she came across Richard in a quiet corner, a place far removed from the polished surfaces of lessons. His gaze was downcast, shadows of remorse flickering in his eyes. He approached hesitantly, voice low and uncertain. "Miss Ford, I want to apologize again. I behaved poorly. You didn't deserve any of that." Penelope regarded him with calm kindness, her smile gentle yet purposeful. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit mistakes." They shared a moment of silence, the tension easing as unspoken understanding passed between them. "I'm working to do better," Richard added quietly. "That's all anyone can ask," Penelope replied. Their exchange was brief but profound, an unspoken promise that respect and empathy could bridge even the widest divides. That evening, Penelope exited lessons under a velvet sky, the cool night air brushing against her face. Her footsteps were steady and sure on the cobblestone street as she walked away from the luminous glow of the restaurant behind her. The night felt charged, the world forever altered by the quiet power she'd wielded without fanfare. Inside, patrons lingered in stunned, respectful silence. The place, once a temple to exclusivity, now hummed with the possibility of transformation. Penelope's presence had unsettled norms and challenged assumptions, leaving a lasting imprint that stretched beyond the gleam of chandeliers and the shimmer of silk. She disappeared into the night, leaving behind an atmosphere forever changed, a reminder that true elegance is not draped in finery, but worn in integrity, courage, and grace.